So this is a film about an opera house being terrorised by a half-man, half-rat. Great idea, Dario. Why didn't I think of that? Welcome to the 13th episode of my Dario Argento review series. You'll find all my others of his in my Argento playlist. There will be spoilers today. This movie is almost 25 years old. To give you a more detailed synopsis of the plot, so this one begins with a baby in a basket floating down the stream of some underwater cavern or another, and this basket is intercepted by rats, and we're meant to believe that the baby is then raised by the rats to be one of their own. It's a completely silly idea, but this film's meant to be sort of fantasy horror. We're not meant to take it too seriously. We're not meant to believe that this could happen in real life, so I'm sort of prepared to give the movie the benefit of the doubt on this one and try and see it in the spirit that it's intended. It's a little bit similar to Batman Returns, you know, the Oswald Cobblepot character being raised by penguins. And you know what, I'll give Dario Argento a little bit of credit at this point, because I watched this film the other night for the first time and I thought it was better than that film, Batman Returns, not one of my favourite Batman films in all honesty. So this boy is raised by rats, and he even gets a few traits and characteristics like rats, so he can climb around the walls really quick just like a rat, and he can also telepathically communicate with other humans if he wants to. Is this something that rats can do with each other? Otherwise it's a little bit bizarre. Now this boy, he doesn't have the best of morals. If humans come down into his caverns, then he'll kill them, but any rat that goes up to the opera house is generally killed. They've even got a full-time rat catcher up above ground for this purpose. So that's a nice little kink to the story, I thought. This idea that the rats down below will kill humans if they invade their space, but humans will do the same up above. So presumably this Phantom, as I'm going to call him for the rest of the movie in line with the title, he leads a mostly uneventful life for quite some time, and then one day he finds himself up in the rafters of the opera house when it's quite quiet, and he spots this young woman called Christine. Now she's an opera singer, but she's not the main star of the latest show. She's the understudy. The Phantom spots Christine singing and instantly falls in love with her, so you know, he goes and speaks to her, and then he starts talking to her telepathically when they're not together, and they start this little tryst, and this goes on throughout much of the rest of the movie. But because the Phantom is having to spend more time towards the surface in order to see Christine, this puts him into contact with more humans, and he ends up having to kill more people than he normally would. So gradually the outer world is starting to know that there's something bad down below, and eventually they're going to come down and try and get the Phantom. So this romance between the Phantom and Christine is sort of destined to end in failure ultimately. So we've got a kind of Beauty and the Beast sort of situation going on here. I was reminded of Edward Scissorhands as well. The Phantom is played by Julian, an actor I've been aware of since I was young. He's someone who sort of pops into really random TV shows, random films, just when you least expect it. And I think by his normal standards, he's, I wouldn't say subdued, but he's certainly reining it back a little bit for this film. I would have expected him to be a little bit more theatrical in his performance with something like this, but he's quite good. And playing Christine, we've got Dario Argento, third consecutive Dario Argento film for her. Now, I did look ahead at this point just to see if Asia is going to be in all the Dario films going right through to the end, but no, it turns out this is actually her last one. So we sort of get a trilogy of Dario Argento films right in the middle of her father's filmography. Now, I could spot in Trauma that this girl was a really good actress, but she didn't have a great part in that film, I didn't think, and the movie wasn't great. Same in the Stendhal Syndrome. I'm relieved to say, at the third and final time of asking, this is a better film for Dario Argento and a much better part as well. I really did enjoy watching her in this one. It's a very gory film, this, from a very early stage. People are getting brutally mutilated, and you see one guy cut in half. There's another guy who gets impaled on a stalactite, and you get to see that in all its glory. There are sex scenes, there's nudity, excess all over the place. I didn't think that this film would be like this, even coming from someone like Dario Argento, because this was not his property originally. You know, Phantom of the Opera goes back aeons. There have been countless adaptations of this on screen and in theatre. So given that it's not his story originally, I thought that he would do a more prim and proper version, if you like. But no, he doesn't. He just basically sticks to his normal thing. If anything, he dials it up even more than what he would normally do. Another reason I thought that this film would not be like this is because my only previous dalliance with Phantom of the Opera was with the 1958 Hammer version, which I only saw it a year ago. From what I recall, it was quite bloodless, that. It played it very safe. It had a very sympathetic Phantom. It was very inoffensive. It didn't want to piss anybody off. Dario's version could not be more opposite. I mean, these two Phantom of the Opera versions that I just happen to have seen, very, very different from each other. I'm not actually sure which one of them I prefer, speaking right now. I mean, neither of them are brilliant films. They're both kind of all right, but definitely very, very different. I think the biggest weakness about this version of Phantom of the Opera is Christine's ever-changing feelings towards the Phantom. So at the start of the movie, she falls in love with this guy ridiculously quickly. I mean, to the point where I have to believe that this is more evidence of yet another superpower that the Rat Man has. Although I guess in the rat world, probably rats fall in love and screw quite quickly within like seconds or minutes of meeting each other, maybe. I mean, they are animals at the end of the day. They don't need to wine and dine and go on dinner dates and stuff. So maybe this is just something deep within the Rat Man, the Phantom, you know, that he can make Christina go all dewy-eyed within like seconds. Okay, I'll give you that one, Dario. But then at the end of the film, or getting towards the end, Christine and the Phantom have just had sex for the first time. You'd think their love would now be cemented. And then Christine just kind of changes her mind about him and suddenly hates him for seemingly no reason. All he does is say that he has to go and conduct some business somewhere and you stay here in the lair. But she goes absolutely apeshit and suddenly she absolutely despises him. And I'm kind of like, really? I mean, if she'd have got suspicious of him at this point, fine, but outright hating him? I found it really bizarre. And then a little bit further on, right at the end of the film, she suddenly goes another 180 and suddenly loves him again, and she's devastated that she's probably not going to see him again and that he's probably going to die. Now, given as well that at this point she's probably figured out, I think, that he's not what she thought he was and that he is this murderer and everybody wants to get him from up above ground. Again, it's just another bizarre character change, so definitely a little bit off-putting throughout this movie, Christina's ever-changing feelings towards this guy. On a more positive note, there are lots of more minor characters in this film who have their own little subplots, most of whom are probably not even aware of what's going on between the Phantom and Christine. I mentioned earlier that Christine is actually the understudy of her show. The woman who's above her is this really obese woman who for some reason really doesn't like Christine, but I found this character a lot of fun, and when she gets hit on the head towards the end, I kind of felt like that should have been the end for her, but it wasn't. That whole scene where the opera house starts to come down because the Phantom is down under the ground somewhere whacking a pillar with a hammer or something. It's a lot of fun, but again, we go back to this idea of this film being complete fantasy horror because, I mean, what are the odds that the Phantom just happens to have a little room with a magic pillar that he can just whack to cause some destruction? But of course, it won't completely destroy the opera house. Some great gore in that scene as well. I don't know if it's a chandelier or part of the ceiling that comes down and just squishes like 20 people, but honestly, if you're a gore hound, you'll get a lot out of this film. Another couple of characters I really liked are the young couple who go down into the caverns looking for treasure. You know, this film's set back in the 19th century, so back then even lower class working people probably didn't have an awful lot going for them in their lives. So the idea that these two people would, you know, try and seek something better for themselves by latching onto any rumour that comes their way is quite believable. And I did feel sorry for these two, you know, and the scene where the girl runs away through the passageways after her boyfriend gets killed, it's sort of a throwback to the sort of nicely paced kill that you used to get in Argento films, like, say, Four Flies on Grey Velvet. You know, not seen a lot of these types of kills in the more recent films of his. So that was pleasing. And speaking of the fact that we're talking about the fact that the film's set in the 19th century, there's a maid character who works for Christine in this who was a lot of fun as well. Now, if this had been a contemporary film, I don't think this part would have been very noteworthy, but I'm pretty sure that back in those days, maids couldn't just run their mouths off like this particular girl does. So every time she was in a scene and making a fuss about something, I found that character a lot of fun. And I've got to mention one more, which is the rat catcher in this. Someone who probably is completely responsible for the plot in this and doesn't even know it, because apparently he's killed like 4,000 rats going back loads of years. So you'd think that the Phantom would have killed this guy at some point, or would kill him during this film, but he doesn't. Probably he's not even aware that it's this one man who's mainly responsible for, you know, killing off half the rat population. But every scene this guy is in is really funny, and the standout is when he starts using this weird machine that like just goes around all the tunnels and starts hoovering up rats. It's like a little trombone attached to the side of it and just starts hoovering them up. Absolutely brilliant fun. It's like a smaller version of that big, large machine that you see go through the car wash in the Willy Wonka film almost. And the rat catcher's got a random midget with him just for this one scene who swiftly gets his head cut off. Brilliant stuff. Argento has never really done well at humour throughout all these films that I've been reviewing, but in this particular film, I think his humour is somehow right on point for like the first time ever. It's as good here as it's ever been. At this juncture, I will show you the version of the film that I've got. Here it is. I've got this on DVD now. First thing to say about this is that I didn't actually want to buy this on DVD because I was expecting the film to be more pap along the lines of the Stendhal syndrome. I would have preferred to have rented it, but it's not available to rent in the UK, so I had to go out and buy this DVD. I got it off eBay for about £10, which I was not amused about at the time that I did it, but I feel a bit better about that now that it's turned out to be an alright film. But having said that, even though I will put this on my shelf next to my other Argento films, I'm not sure that I'll watch this particular copy again. I'm kind of hopeful that they'll bring out a proper Blu-ray in the future, because this is an old DVD. I mean, the film came out in '98. This DVD came out in 2001, the really early days of DVDs, you know, the sort of discs that struggle to cope now with the more modern, huge TVs, and that's how it was for me the other night, because on my large TV, the film was condensed into this like weird square, sort of similar to Justice League, but I think in the case of that film, it was actually designed and filmed with the square in mind, whereas I don't think Argento had a square in mind when he was making this, not at all. So not the ideal conditions with which to watch the film for me. It was watchable, don't get me wrong, but way better on the other Blu-rays and DVDs I've had for other Argento films. Picture quality was all right, I guess. It was reasonably sharp, but again, you'd get a lot better on the more modern discs. So I mentioned earlier that I'd seen a Hammer version of Phantom of the Opera. Here is that one. I think I also said that it came out in '58. I was mistaken. It came out in 1962. I'm not sure which one I prefer, actually, this one from '62 or the Argento one from '98. It's very, very close. You know what, I'm going to ponder on that for a minute or so while I get to the bag of terror and tell you what score I'm going to give for the Argento one. So we've got 1, 2, 3 bloody axes out of 5 for Dario Argento's Phantom of the Opera. This is a massive improvement over some of the scores I've been giving to his films that he brought out before this, things like Trauma and the Stendhal Syndrome. I think you'd have to go back a bit to find the last Argento film that I gave 3 axes and up, so definitely a positive thing. Obviously, his earlier films, you know, his revered pieces, I was giving even higher scores than this, but it's pleasing that at this point in his filmography we get something like this that I actually can enjoy. Now, from memory, I think I gave this film 2.5 out of 5, so I think the Argento one possibly just wins. But having said that, a weird thing with me and Hammer, it takes me more than one viewing to really appreciate a Hammer film. It's a weird phenomenon with those movies, and I've only watched that Phantom of the Opera once, and a guy came in the comments on the review I did for that Hammer version and tried to persuade me to give it a second watch, and I absolutely will at some point, but for now I think the Argento one just about shades it. So there we have it. I will be back soon for another Argento review. I think the next one is Sleepless. So until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.